Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video I'm back talking about another new Survivor season, where here I'll be giving my cast assessment for Survivor 47, where obviously like all my other cast assessments, I'll be running through the cast one by one, talking about my opinions on these players along the way, and eventually at the end, naming my winner pick for the season. And like my other cast assessments, I'm intentionally doing this cast assessment without all of the information, where obviously by the end of the preseason, we'll have these more extended interviews, getting to know a lot more about these players. Though for the prep for this video, all I've really done is read their bios and watched their 1-minute clip that they got released by Survivor themselves, to where, again, I don't have all of the information that we're eventually going to get by the end of the preseason. These more extended interviews, though, again, I kind of do that intentionally to keep consistency with these cast assessments. And I am coming off of picking a winner in Survivor 46, so that's something. See if that continues. I actually believe in the past, every single time that I've picked a winner for Survivor, it was in a spot where I did it back to back. Me having picked Jeremy and Michelle, along with Wendell and Nick. Sure, maybe that trend will continue here. We will see. But before we actually talk about each person, I do want to say about the cast generally. I do like this cast. Now, again, for the most part, it is more of the same from the new era, where I feel like this cast kind of feels very much in line with something like Survivor 45. Though very notably, there's a lot of broadcasters on this cast. There's also just a couple like random notable names on this cast I'm excited to see play the game. And also in general, I feel like this cast has a lot of people that I see a lot of potential in, where I feel like there's been seasons in the past where I come out of the preseason not feeling too good about a lot of the cast. But I feel like this is a cast where like over half of these people, I feel like we're in serious contention for me of people to pick as my winner pick. So again, in general, I do really like this cast, where again, we'll be running through them in chronological order. So let's start off with Andy, who is one of those people that I mentioned before that is a notable name in the Survivor community. And he was a big RHB patron for a very long time, to where Andy is someone that is clearly a massive super fan of the show, had been trying to get on for years, supposedly was in the finals of last season. And I'm personally very excited to see Andy here, and I do think there's a lot of potential there. I mean, he is someone that is of an archetype that would typically do well on Survivor. I mean, he himself compared himself to Austin from 45, and I would assume Austin probably took his spot on that cast, even though Austin himself was an alternate. But still, I do think Andy does fit in that mold, but is a little bit older, to where, again, you would assume more life experience in that light. Also, a much more blatant super fan of the game, to where, again, he should know what he should be doing, while also, again, coming off as a largely affable presence, someone that is seemingly primed to do well in challenges. And in general, again, I have a lot of faith in Andy here. I'm actually really excited to see him play. So again, definitely a top contender for me, definitely moving on as a potential winner pick. Next up, we got Anika, who is another person I do very much like on this cast. I mean, she's someone that also comes off as a massive fan, talks about how on her dating profile, she said that she's meant to win Survivor. Right. Clearly, she's a big fan. And in general, I do feel like she's someone that could potentially do well in the new era. I do feel like there's a little bit of question marks over some things, where in many ways, she does kind of remind me of Venus. Not necessarily the Venus that we saw on the island, but more so what I thought of Venus in the preseason, where again, someone that is a big fan of the show, someone that again is talking about the game in a very strategic and analytical way. But there is like something there though that does worry me about how she's necessarily going to gel with others, where we do see her in her video that she does have a seemingly extroverted personality, though I feel like at the end of the day, there are worries there for me in terms of her being a little bit on the out socially, though again, I do expect her to be better insulated than someone like Venus was, as again, unless she really turns out to be really terrible socially. But I do think, looking at the tribe, I do see some people that I could see as natural allies for her, to where, and I feel like Anika is someone that I would want to do well here, and does seem like someone that would have the skills for the game, but I do think there's a little bit of hesitancy there to leave her off of my potential winner picks. Next up, moving on to another of the bigger names here, someone that I am personally very excited to see on the show. That person is Aysha Welsh, who, if you do not know, is a podcaster from RHAP, which again, I've been listening to RHAP for years, where again, seeing someone from RHAP actually be on the actual proper show is kind of insane here. And Aysha is someone that I do think is very well suited for the new era. I do think Aysha is the type of player that I would very much expect to do well here. I'll be very surprised if Aysha is an early boot on most given seasons. I think she's physical enough to where I would be surprised if she gets voted out early. I do think she is very good socially. I think that's probably her main strong suit coming into this game, to where I will say that that is a similar skill set to what Sabaya had from Survivor 45, where obviously something wonky can happen like that. But I do think Aysha is someone that I'm looking at very highly and someone that I actively do want to do well here. Though I will say I do think one of my minor worries about Aysha are particularly long-term prospects, particularly by a time of mid-merge, where I do feel like she very much comes off as a style of player that is going to be this big target in the middle of the game. I feel like she's someone that is just, again, going to be so well liked, someone that is so well respected that I don't think people are going to actively want to go to the end with her. And I think her end game path is going to be a bit rocky. But again, I do think she is someone that has a lot of the skills that you need for Survivor. So again, moving her on as a potential winner pick. Next up, moving on to the elusive Caroline, person that we knew pretty much nothing about until very recently. I mean, even at the time that I did my cast reaction, which was only a few weeks ago, we hadn't even seen a proper image of Caroline. Yet here she is. And Caroline, I kind of liked here as well. Someone that I think there's a lot of potential there. Someone that seems to be a big fan of the show. Someone that seems athletic enough. Though I do think there's a little bit of coldness there, where it kind of reminds me of someone like Emily Flippin. Though I think she's a bit more athletic than Emily. I mean, she does talk about having played in water polo. And because of that, again, I do think she might be a bit safer earlier on. Though again, it just really comes down to how good socially she is, which again is a little bit of a question mark at this point. Though Caroline's someone that, again, I do actually very much like. And I did originally have her in my list of winner picks. Though when thinking about it a bit more, I do think there's a little bit of hesitancy there with her socially in particular. That again is mostly just an unknown for me at this current point, to where maybe I'll be higher on her after the interviews. But again, I do very much like Caroline. I do think there is this Emily Flippin potential there. Emily, especially after she had developed. And again, if she's able to get into a better starting point in the game, I feel like, again, Caroline could do very, very well, but I do have a little bit of hesitancies that leave her out of contention for my winner pick. Next, I'm moving on to Gabe. And Gabe is someone that I remember from the preseason talking about how he's going to be the first on the Mount Rushmore of the new era, and instantly came off as someone that is going to be a bit cocky in the game, so that's going to play a bit ruthless. And I feel like we just got a bit more of that in his interviews here. I mean, he seems like someone that is very much hamming up this villain sort of mold, this person that talks about not caring about the people around him and just wanting to vote them out. And again, I think because of that, Gabe is probably going to be a fun character. I feel like Gabe is going to give some great confessionals. I feel like he's going to play the game very, very hard. Now, again, I question how that's going to translate to the game. Now, 100%, I do not think he's actually going to act like this in the game. I don't think he's going to be going to people and saying, I don't care about you and I want to vote you out. But I could see a world where Gabe would come off as like a bit inauthentic, that people would kind of recognize how schemy he really is, to where, again, I definitely do worry for Gabe in that light, though I actually do feel pretty good about Gabe as well. Again, Gabe was another one that was on the edge of potentially being a potential winner pick here. And again, he is someone that I would have faith in being a very active strategic player. And again, I assume he'd be decent enough socially. I do still feel like, again, there are worries there of him potentially playing a bit too sloppily and maybe not necessarily gelling with his tribe. So I did leave him out of winner contention. Next up, moving on to Genevieve, who is someone that coming into this cast reveal, I was very much expecting to be a top contender for me. I feel like she was someone that kind of gave me like Ellie vibes from 43, which too far didn't work out in 43. But again, that was my winner pick for 43. And again, I thought that could kind of follow here, again, kind of being this like pseudo Kim Spradlin sort of mold. Yeah, though I will say, after doing the research process here, again, I don't think she's as high on the board for me anymore. I do feel like she's someone that I'm a bit worried about how she's necessarily going to play this game. I mean, she herself said that she's going to be grateful she's still there on day 4 and how bad of a liar she is, which to be fair isn't that bad of a sign. Like, I think survivors become over reliant on how much you need to lie, and the reality is I don't think you need to be that good of a liar to win in Survivor. I don't think that's really necessarily this big trait that you need. Well, considering the fact that she talks about how she's not a good liar and proceeds to say that she's going to lie about her occupation because she's a lawyer and doesn't want people to know that she's a lawyer, which again, I still don't even get why this is truly a thing. Like, obviously, yes, we did see it in Survivor 45 that we got 3 lawyers to the final 5. But again, none of them won. They were literally 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And 2 of them had no real win equity anyway, to where it's like, I don't think this is even that big of a thing that you have to go out of your way to lie about. But again, she's obviously intending to here. And I do think that is a bit of a red flag for me. Again, the fact that she is aware at how she isn't a good liar, yet is planning on lying is definitely not a good sign. Beyond that, while she is someone that, again, comes off a bit bubbly in her video, I do still get the sense that she's a little bit intense, and a bit worried that she's gonna be like so hyper-focused on the game, to where I could very much just see her kind of being left on the outs on her original starting tribe. I feel like she's someone that I'm kind of looking at as a potential first boot, kind of in like the Justine sort of mold, where again, I don't feel that great about Genevieve at this point, even though I did come into this expecting to be pretty high on her. Next up, moving on to the biggest name of the cast, I guess, and that's John Lovett. Where, again, I guess everyone knows who he is. I didn't know who he was. But, again, supposedly a big podcaster, prominent figure within, like, the political commentary sort of world. Again, I didn't know who he was, but I guess a lot of people do. And I do think he very much comes off to me as essentially, like, the next coming of, like, a David Wright, a Mike White, this sort of person who's probably going to be on the outs right away. I feel like John is someone that I would very much expect to be this person kind of dangling onto the game initially. Though I will say if he survives that, again, we have good track records for these other players if they're able to survive that. Again, David Wright obviously played a very impressive game once he was able to get a footing in the game. Same thing goes with Mike White, with him playing one of the best runner-up games in the history of the show. Again, I think John Lovett's kind of in that sphere. Now, I will say, I don't know if anyone's like clamoring to give John Lovett the win. Again, obviously, he is someone that I'm assuming people are going to recognize, and through that, people are going to be aware of his success. And I don't know if people are going to be clamoring to hand him $1 million, to where I do think that is definitely a worry there for John Lovett, to where I'm not really looking at him as anyone that has any real potential to win. He's actually probably the person I think has the least potential to win the game. And I think there is some potential longevity for him, yet even then, there's a lot of worries for him early on as well, to where, again, I do not feel anywhere near confident enough to pick him as my winner pick. Next up, moving on to Kishan, who is not one of these people that I probably knew the least about coming into this preseason, where he's someone that we didn't see at all in the promo. He's someone that also got leaked a bit later than some of the other people, where, again, I did not know anything about him. However, after watching his video, I do very much like Kishan. I feel like he's someone that I'm hoping does well in this season. I feel like he's someone that could be a very fun presence. Someone that, in a way, comes off as like kind of like the second coming of Omer, at least from a like more character standpoint. I will say from a player standpoint, I don't feel as confident about him as I did with Omer, where Omer is someone that was very high on the preseason 42. I don't know if I necessarily get that with Kishan. I do think he's going to be someone that is well liked socially, but I don't know if the strategy is necessarily there. Then again, he is clearly an intelligent person. I mean, he is an ER doctor. Obviously, you would expect him to be very intelligent to become one, though at the same time, ER doctors haven't done well in Survivor in the past. I mean, Peter Bagenstos was an ER doctor, and again, it didn't go well for him. Him obviously being like very cocky and pretty bad socially, to where, again, that is a worry for Kishan, but I feel like personality-wise, he just gives good vibes. To where, again, I feel pretty good about him, though, again, I think there are those red flags there that leave him out of my potential winner picks. Next up, moving on to Kyle. And Kyle's another person. Knew very little about Kyle coming into this preseason, and now having watched his videos, Kyle is fine. He's fine. Could he do well? Yeah, for sure. Do I have anything to really say about him? Not really. Like, I mean, he actually feels like someone that would be cast on like older school seasons of the show. He actually feels like kind of like an outlier amongst this cast, where, again, he feels in line of like the good old boy sort of archetype, again, being like the JT of this cast. Though for me, I didn't really get that charisma from him, though. I mean, he just seemed like purely affable presence, someone that, again, seems to be potentially doing well in challenges. I don't really get the sense that he's hyper focused on the strategy of the game. And to be fair, I mean, Modern Survivor hasn't been as much focus on cutthroat strategy. I literally just came from the likes of Kenzie and Jam Jam winning Survivor, to where I think Kyle, again, has potential to win for sure. I mean, he's a family man. He's someone that, again, you would think if he gets to the end, at least based on story, people would be willing to reward him with the money, though I don't really get the sense that he's going to be playing the game in an overly strategic way. And then mixing that with the fact that, again, he is a bigger guy, seems like going to be a physical threat, while also, again, a potential jury threat. I don't really have confidence in making it to the end. So again, not picking him as my winner pick. Next, I'm moving on to Rachel, the first of two former alternates that were on this cast, Rachel being the alternate for Survivor 46. And I do like Rachel. Rachel seems like a very fun personality here, where in many ways she really comes off as like an older version of Gabby from David vs. Goliath, which, I mean, to be fair, is essentially how we looked at Jess Chong from 46, which I would not be shocked if they were kind of competing for the same spot on that cast, where, yet Rachel just feels in line with that. Now, obviously, there are worries in that fact, and the fact that obviously Jess Chong didn't go particularly well. but I do think there's a lot of potential here. Again, kind of in line the likes of Anika and Caroline and even Gabe, of these people that are kind of cleaning right off my contender list, where I do think she is someone that seems to know the game, someone that seems to be a pretty big fan, someone that can be very unassuming. And I feel like if she makes the merge, she could be a very deadly player. I do think there's obviously the worry that does she make it there? As we've seen players in her archetype, again, struggle to even get to the merge. Though I think if she makes it there, I could definitely see this like Erica sort of run in her. I could definitely see this kind of like scrappy underdog that's able to pull the numbers together and play an impressive game from that point on. To where, again, I do think there is potential there of Rachel, though again, enough hesitancy's there to where I didn't pick her as my winner pick. Next up, moving on to Rome, which I'm surprised he's going by Rome, because I always thought of him as Jerome before this, but still. And Rome is someone that I was looking at super highly coming into this preseason. I mean, someone that, like, just right away from his initial confessionals in the trailer, along with the fact that he's also someone that's in the commercials. It's like Rome, someone that they're trying to hype up on the show. And again, I was expecting big things from him. And from what I've seen of him so far, he definitely comes off a bit different than I was expecting. Like, I thought he would be a bit more of a chill, laid back guy. So he seems to be like kind of the complete opposite of that, to where he even says himself that he's this like loud, outspoken sort of guy. He obviously is a commentator, to where I would not be shocked if he's doing that sort of thing in his confessionals, which I'm sure will get kind of grating. But still, Rome is someone that I do think there is potential there for sure. I feel like he's the type of player that should have an easy path to the merge. He is someone that, just looking at his tribe, I do feel like there should be some natural allies there. To where, again, unless that tribe is like the disaster tribe that goes to tribal over and over and over again, I do feel like I would very much expect him to make the merge. Though, once there, again, I'm not really sure how it will go. I do think there are worries that he'll make himself too big of a target, talk up a big game, actually make a big move, and do kind of just see him as someone that could be a potentially very sloppy player. So again, I think he will be playing hard, and obviously, like, all this could just be for show, how he's acting in the preseason. Yet if he does act that way on the island, I feel like, again, I would not feel the greatest about him long term. So again, did not pick him as my winner pick. Next, I'm moving on to Sam, and Sam is another one of these people that has broadcasting experience, being an interviewer for a football team, and he himself looking like this big athletic sort of guy, to where I was not feeling good about Sam coming into this season. Though I will say, from his interviews and everything I've seen about him, he seems to know what he's doing, at least. He seems like a big fan of the show, probably one of the bigger, like, long-term fans of the show, where, again, it feels like a lot of this cast are more recent fans. Sam is someone that mentions, as a kid, watching Ozzy lose in Cook Islands, to where, again, he seems like a big fan, to where, again, I actually have more faith in his strategic ability at this point. I would also not be shocked if he is, like, the linchpin of his starting tribe, where I kind of get, like, Hunter-ish vibes from him, where I could see that being, like, kind of how he's insulated early on. The fact that he's going to be this, like, person that really helps his tribe in challenges and has an easy ride to the merge, though, like Hunter, I just don't think he'll be able to last the entire way. I feel like there's no way they're going to let this guy get to the tail end unless he becomes like a Xander sort of figure where no one really respects him by that point. I feel like Sam, again, is just someone that's going to have such a tough road to the end of the game. Sure, while I actually feel better about him now than what I did coming into this preseason, I do still feel like he's someone that I just think logically it doesn't really make sense for him to make it to the tail end of the game. So again, did not pick him as my winner pick. Next, I'm moving on to Sierra. And Sierra's someone that I felt like we saw a lot of in the original promo, her getting to talk about being Miss Delaware and talking about being an underdog, I guess. So I came out of that thinking of like, okay, she's probably someone to watch here. And after looking at her video and her bio, I feel like, again, she is probably someone that is going to do very well here. Now, I will say this was old school Survivor. If this was like Survivor back in the 20s, I think she actually probably would have been my winner pick. She feels like this person that's, again, kind of perfectly acclimated for the game of Survivor, especially back then, or around all these like Mactor types. Or again, she's a pageant girl, someone that is a bit older than, again, the ones that we would typically see in Survivor, who are like typically in the 21 to 25 range. She's 27. She seems to have a lot of life experience, talks about all the different jobs that she's had. She just seems like someone that would just naturally be in the majority alliance, unless she's like part of this like cool kids club that gets revolted on, kind of like what happened in Karamoan. I think Sierra would have been a chalk pick to at least make it very deep back then. The question is, how does that correlate to New Era, where obviously casting is a lot different, also game structure is a lot different, to where, despite that, I actually still feel pretty good about Sierra, actually, to where while she's not like someone I'm like rooting for on the season, I'm really hoping does well, I feel like she is someone that I am expecting to do well. I think she is, and just someone that is probably going to easily make the merge, probably not going to be one of the big targets right away, and seems to be social enough to where, again, we've seen a lot of social winners recently, to where, again, I actually feel pretty decent about Sierra, so I'm moving her on as a potential winner pick. Next, I'm moving on to Saul, which feels weird calling him now after knowing him as Solomon for so long. And Saul is someone that I very much like. Saul is someone that I very much wanted to pick as a winner pick. And spoiler alert, he's not going to be a contender for me, even though he barely is out of that range. Though Saul is someone that, despite the fact that, again, he is on the older side of things, again, he's in his 40s, in a cast that definitely has a lot of people in their 20s. That is definitely, again, a worry there for Saul. Again, I don't know how well he's going to blend in socially necessarily, but again, I just liked him through his interview. I also really liked his bio answers as well. When he is a poker player, which, I mean, does lead to, again, mixed success, but still, I think show that he has a strategic side to him. Also, he has a very similar occupation to that of Gabler, where he even compares himself to Gabler, which, again, might obviously be a big red flag for a lot of people, but I do think an understated strength of Gabler is just how affable he was to a lot of his cast, to where while he would make these strategic faux pas early on, people still wanted to work with him. While obviously, yeah, you can correlate that to people think he was a GOAT towards the end of the game, again, it was still enough to garner respect to win the game. And I feel like Saul here is, again, someone that I actually feel pretty decent about, to where I think there is this path for him to be this like more Gabler style figure, but also this path to be this more cunning strategic player as well. Now, I will say the big issue for me is the fact that I don't think mixing the two will work. I do think he has to pick a path. And just by the way he speaks, I do think you kind of get the sense that he is this more cerebral player. And I think because of that, I don't know if necessarily playing like Gabler will necessarily work. Again, I did very much like most of what he was saying in his interview and do want him to do well. I just feel like, again, not entirely sure if it actually will work out for him. Next up, moving on to Sue. And Sue is obviously the oldest person on this cast, 59 years old. She talks a lot about wanting to be the oldest woman to win Survivor. And again, Sue's fine. I mean, obviously there was some controversy around her social media activity earlier in the pre-season, but outside of that, again, Sue just seems like a largely affable presence here. I was kind of expecting her to be a bit more kooky coming into her interviews, where I kind of thought she would maybe be like the next coming of Debbie, and she's not necessarily that. I actually feel like she's probably more in line with someone like a Julie Alley. So again, I do feel like Sue's here is going to be very high variance. Obviously, she's going to be someone that's easy to outcast from the very beginning, though I do think that hasn't been the norm in recent seasons to just kind of outcast these like older mom figures. Have been doing well in recent seasons, to where I think there's definitely a lot of potential longevity for Sue, and she does compare herself to Tony, so that's something. To be honest, not really seeing that actually happening here. I don't really, to where, again, based on her interviews, I never really got the greatest sense of how she's looking at the game from a strategic light, but I'll say I'm not completely out on Sue. I just think, again, it is going to be a tougher path for her than many of the other players, so again, did not pick her as a winner pick. Next up, moving on to Teeny, and Teeny is someone that I very much want to do well here. Again, another person pretty prominent on the online community, had played an LRG in the past, and I know a lot of people were really excited to see him on the cast, and again, I think there's a lot of potential there, where I feel like they really come off as this like perfect package of a player for the new era, someone that would potentially do very good socially, but I would be very surprised if there's someone that's not in the majority alliance on their original starting tribe. Also someone that has this like cutthroat nature to them as well. They obviously are a massive fan of the show, have played these sort of games in the past, where again, I would very much expect Teeny to do well. I do think the worry for Teeny, though, for me is, are they too much of this like perfect sort of player for the new era? To really straight up, it very much reminds me of Evie. Evie is someone that I also had a lot of potential early on, was in the center of everything on their original starting tribe, but then once they got to the merge, everything crumbled around them because they were looked at as this massive threat on the board, and I do feel like Teeny could potentially be in that spot as well. It's where Teeny's another one that, again, was barely off the contender list, and I mean, to be fair to them, obviously we have seen someone like Jam Jam win very recently despite being such an overt social threat. Yeah, I feel like that was in a spot where obviously the game played out in a way that allowed him to be this massive underdog throughout the game, where again, that's not necessarily a guarantee for Teeny here, to where again, I would expect Teeny to be an early to mid merge boot, but if they're able to get past that, there's obviously a lot of potential there. Though again, for this video, barely missed on being a potential winner pick candidate here. Next up, moving on to Tiana, another alternate, her being the alternate for Survivor 45, where we do get a lot of shade being thrown at Hannah Rose in her video, where obviously there's a lot of talk at the time that I feel bad for the alternate that didn't get on the show, and who would have guessed it, they're on the show anyway a year later. And Tiana is someone that I actually do think has a lot of potential in the game here. I do think she's someone that very much gave me D vibes from her interview, which, to be fair, I was not super high on D in the preseason. Obviously, that ended up turning out wrong. And again, I think Tiana kind of fits in line with what I thought of D in the preseason, which is not the most riveting personality for me personally, yet someone that, again, seems very well acclimated for this game. Someone that seems to have this personality that I assume will gel with most of the players out there. Someone that seems to be physical enough to do well in challenges, while also someone that, again, seems to know the game. To her in that way, like, she kind of reminds me of Casey from Big Brother as well. And that I just feel like she's going to have a pretty stable ride through most of the game. While I feel like she also potentially has that killer instinct to kick in towards the end game, to take the win, to where, again, I do actually feel pretty good about Tiana here. I feel like on most given new era seasons in particular, she'd be the chalk pick. To where, again, moving her on as a potential winner pick. And the final person of the cast here ends up being TK. And TK, I'll be honest, is probably one of the people that I have the least to talk about here. So I feel like he very much came off similar to Kyle to me, in the sense that he seems like a largely affable presence. I don't really have anything necessarily negative to say about him, but I also don't really get a great sense of how he's necessarily going to play the game, where I don't really get the sense that he's the most strategic presence in the world. Now, again, he was a former athlete, so I'm assuming he's going to be a very physical-based player, probably going to be well-positioned early on. Also, again, I don't think he has this, like, inherent threat level to him, like Kyle did, where Kyle, again, is this like family man, to where, again, I think there is that big jury potential there, to where I feel like TK can maybe squeeze by that, especially when the likes of like a Sam and like some other people that are like big social threats, like a Teeny and an Aysha, to where, again, maybe TK can escape all that and like sneak his way through the merge. Yeah, I really, again, just don't really get the sense of like how TK is necessarily going to be playing this game, though. I really don't have this like confidence in his strategic ability, to where overall, again, I'm just not like particularly confident in TK. Not necessarily because like anything that he necessarily did wrong in his interviews. Yeah, I just didn't really get the vibe of him being someone that should be high on my board here. So again, did not pick him as a winner pick. With that, that is the entire cast of Survivor 47. And now let's run through my remaining contenders and talk about who is my winner pick for the season, to where the people that I moved on here are Andy, Asia, Sierra, and Tiana. All of which, again, are players that I'm definitely expecting to make it deep into the game. The first person I'm going to cut here is pretty easily Sierra of this bunch, to where I do feel like of this bunch, Sierra is probably the one I have the least confidence in her strategic ability and her knowledge of the game, to where, again, I feel like she's someone that, again, is going to be this very social player, which, again, we've seen social winners in the past. Yeah, I feel like there still is a lot of this potential of her being this, like, losing finalist, where really the person that she probably reminds me the most of is someone like a Chelsea Meisner. So, again, she could be a very, like, competent player, but I just don't know if it'll all come together to garner this respect from the jury. So, again, I did not end up picking her. And then the next person I'm going to cut here is going to be Asia. And this is for a couple factors. First up is, again, as I mentioned before, I think she is someone that is probably going to be a big target mid-merge. I'll very much be surprised if she has an easy path to the end, especially considering the fact that we know that people out there have recognized her. People know who she is. So that's definitely something to call out there. But beyond that, I'll be honest, I never got the greatest sense of Asia's strategic ability for these social strategy games. Again, having listened to her talk a lot about Big Brother in particular, I feel like she's someone that has a very baseline level of strategy. So again, I think she's going to be playing the game in a very strategic way, but I don't really think she's going to be the type of person I'm expecting to pull off these like high level moves. So I could definitely see her being outplayed from a strategic point of view. While at the end of the day, again, I do think she's very social, someone that I'm expecting to make it deep into the game, be very well liked by her cast. I do just feel like strategically, while I think she will be active, I don't know if she'll be actively good, which again, isn't necessarily the end all be all in modern Survivor. Again, literally Jam's the epitome of that. Yeah, I did think it was enough to at least not make her my winner pick here. And with that, we're down to the top two, where here we do have Andy and we have Tiana. And this is kind of a weird case where I'm actually going against who I think I should pick as my winner pick. Where I actually feel probably better about winning the game for one of these players than the other, but I just feel like picking the other person anyway. Here for my winner pick for Survivor 47, I'm going to pick Andy. And again, realistically, I should probably pick Tiana here. I think Tiana probably has all of the skills that you would think are necessary for new era Survivor. Again, she very much comes off as the D of this cast, though at the same time, we're literally in a post-45 world where I literally just saw a D do that. And I feel like maybe they'll watch out for those sort of presences, while Andy kind of has the opposite issue. Again, I think he's someone that will very much remind people of Austin, who obviously they just saw lost the game. Or maybe that's a good sign for him. And straight up, again, I did literally pick Austin for 45 as well, where, again, I guess I'm keeping with that archetype as well. But and Andy's just someone that, again, I would want to win more personally, and obviously just gel with his story a bit more. He's obviously this big super fan, been trying to get on the show for years, while also, again, seemingly being this well-rounded player, which, to be fair, is kind of how I looked at, like, Owen from 43 and didn't turn out the greatest. But all in all, I do still feel very good about Andy. I do think, again, there still is that sort of issue with him in the sense that I think he's either going to be a big threat and taken out before the end game, or be someone that's not really looked at as a threat and able to skate on by to where, again, hopefully he is able to pull off that like Austin sort of middle there, but just have that killer instinct to cut the person he needs to cut by the end. Again, I'm hoping that that's the case for Andy, for him essentially just to turn out to be the better version of Austin. Though again, realistically, I think Tiana is probably the person I actually am expecting to just naturally do better in the game. But again, I just have more faith in Andy's strategic ability, in the fact that he is this massive super fan of the show, and he seems pretty well-rounded in every other aspect. So again, screw it. I'm going with Andy here instead. But with that, that is my cast assessment for Survivor 47. Obviously, down the road, same coverage as we typically do, mid-season power ranking around the time of Mergatory. Also, massive review probably by the end of the year. Hopefully it's not longer than last time. It probably will be though. And then obviously a player ranking immediately following that. Now, beyond that, obviously we do have Big Brother currently airing as well, where also massive Big Brother review probably coming. Very worried about the length of that, but again, that will be coming at some point next month, along with the player ranking for that as well. Obviously, also we have Challenge Valve Eras currently airing, which I'm also going to eventually do a review of that. I mean, I'm sure no one really cares, but A&W is about to end. I'll be doing a review of that too, so that's something. Also, beyond that, if you want to keep up with my thoughts on the season as it's currently airing, you can follow me at Twitch at twitch.tv/MarineReview, where I stream every Wednesdays and Sundays and talk about whatever's going on in reality TV. And while we're plugging things, might as well plug the $5 membership tier, where for $5 you can watch videos immediately as they're finished. Or, I mean, at this point in particular, I do have quite a bit sitting in the back burner, and I still have a few more videos to edit following this, to where, again, there'll be a decent chunk there that probably won't be out for a while, or straight up, like, over half of them I don't even intend on releasing until like next year. So again, if you want to watch videos early, you can do that. But obviously beyond this, expect just more of the same sort of videos for the channel. I mean, technically you can just look at the members only videos and see what's coming up eventually. But still, that's all I gotta say about the cast of Survivor 47. Thank you for watching.